Hi everyone! Today I'm going to be making a Mother's Day card since Mother's Day is right around the corner and getting here really quickly. I'm using a piece of watercolor distress cardstock. I just went over it with my powder tool to cut down on any static electricity. I'm going to be heat embossing my entire background. I'm using the new Love for Mom stamp set from Mint Owl Studio. This is a great set for Mother's Day, and it even has a grandmother sentiment in there. Or if you just like floral stamps, you can mix and match this with any sentiments from any other stamp sets. So I'm inking up this flower stamp with the Versamark ink. It's the clear ink used for heat embossing. I'm randomly stamping these flowers all over the background. It's kind of hard to see because using the clear ink, you can see I'm picking up my paper so that the light kind of shines on it so I can tell where I stamped it. I'm not using really any rhyme or reason, I'm just randomly stamping these. And then I'm going to go ahead and cover them with the Hero Arts white embossing powder. Since I'm doing this on white cardstock, you could also use clear embossing powder. So I'll go ahead and tap off any extras and just make sure that I got embossing powder covering each of those stamps completely. So then I went ahead and heated that with my heat tool to melt all of the embossing powder. So I'm creating a watercolor background. I'm going to be using my distress inks for watercoloring. I'm starting with the hickory smoke and I'm coloring in the background. So I'm not coloring in the flowers, just all of that negative space outside of the flowers. I added plenty of water because I wanted it to be really light. I didn't want it to be a dark gray color. So that's one way that you can kind of change the color of your distress inks. So I'm going to keep the flowers black, really neutrals, because I'm going to be coloring in my main image in color. So I wanted the background to be kind of a black gray. So to color in the flowers, I'm using the black soot. Again, the more water you add, the lighter it's going to be. If you want it to be a little bit darker, just add less water. So I'm coloring in each of the petals on those flowers. And then for the centers, I'm using the fossilized amber. So I'm just putting my ink on my craft sheet and then spritzing that with water and then coloring in each of the center of the flowers. I thought the little bit of yellow in the background would kind of make that pop. Even though I said I wanted to keep it more gray, it really doesn't take away from my main image, which you'll see in the final photos. So I'm going to be using the flower bunch that's in the vase, and I'm going to be watercoloring this as well. So I'm stamping this with my Versamark ink on a piece of distress watercolor cardstock, the same cardstock that I used for the background. So I'm inking this up really well and then stamping it down and making sure that I get plenty of pressure on there to cover all of the areas of the stamp. I want to make sure I get a really crisp image. For this image, I'm going to be heat embossing this with the Zing charcoal embossing powder. It's like a black, but it's a little bit lighter, so it's kind of like a really dark gray. And then I'll go ahead and heat that to melt all of the embossing powder. So I'm using my distress markers for these because I just need a little bit of ink. I don't need very much like my background. So I'm starting with the worn lipstick and just coloring in one of the flowers. And then I'm going to color in another flower with the wild honey. And you could use any of your colors. You can also use any of the distress ink products. It'll work well to color these in, or any other brand of watercolors that you might have. Next, I'm moving on to the peeled paint, and I'm going to color in all of the leaves. Next, I'm going to use the chip sapphire, and I'm just going to color in 2 of the flowers. And then I'm going to take the cracked pistachio and color the last flower that I have there. And for the center of those flowers, I'm going to use the spiced marmalade. And later on, I actually went over them with a brown distress ink. For the vase, I'm using the broken china because I want it to be really light blue. And then once I got done coloring this in, I set it aside to dry before I cut the image out. So for my background, I'm going to be creating a frame. I have the watercolor piece that I did, and then I have another black piece of cardstock, and I'm lining up 2 of the stitched rectangle dies from Simon Says Stamp. So I want to get that second one pretty close to even in the center, as close as I can get it. And then I take some washi tape and tape them down so that they don't move when I run them through my cut-a-bug. So like I said, I have a piece of black cardstock that measures the same size, and what this is going to do is create a frame for me to add to my card, which you'll see in just a minute. So I die cut those out, and now I have the outer frame, the inner rectangle, and then the black frame. So I'm going to take the outer frame and add that to my white A2 size card base with my ATG gun. So I'll take that and line it up, and you want to make sure that you keep this outer frame and the inside piece the same way so that the flowers would match up if they were all one piece. Before I adhere down the black frame, I'm going to take a strip of white cardstock and stamp my sentiment on it. I'm using the one that says Happy Mother's Day. And I'm just stamping this with my Tuxedo Black Memento ink. So I took my watercolor flowers and just placed them down so that I knew where to stamp my sentiment. And then I'm going to take that strip with my sentiment and adhere that to the back of the black frame. So you'll see that I'll add a little bit of adhesive to the back of that frame. And then stick the sentiment right down on there. The reason I did this is because that frame is actually going to be popped up on my card, so I didn't want to lay the sentiment down flat. Alright, so now that I have that on there, I'm going to go ahead and adhere down the middle piece. So I'm just going to add my adhesive to the back. And then I'm going to slide that in so that my frame has enough space to be adhered down as well. So I'm just making sure that I get it perfectly in the center. And then on the back of the frame, I'm going to be adding some 3D foam squares. I have the little ones from Best Creation, and they fit perfectly within that frame. They're not too big to stick out the edges or anything like that. So once I get that all covered with my foam squares, I can go ahead and adhere that down. And then I'm also going to be using some foam squares to adhere down my vase. So for that, I'm just using the larger ones. And all of the supplies that I'm using on this card are linked down below if you're interested. So then I can go ahead and adhere that right down next to my sentiment, and it is going to be overlapping the frame a little bit. Alright, so a few final steps. I'm going to be adding some sequins. I'm using the snowflake mix. I was going to use the gold, but I decided that that would be a little bit too harsh of a color for this card, so I'm going to use the white, the clear, and the gray. And I'm just randomly scattering these on my card. And then I can go ahead and adhere them down with my multi-medium in the matte finish. You can also use glossy accents or the Tombow Mono Multi Glue. You just want to use a really strong liquid adhesive to adhere sequins down. And then the final step, I'm going to cover the vase with some glossy accents to make it look more like a realistic vase. You just want to make sure that you get a really even layer so that it is completely clear on the base. And then, of course, before you send it, let it dry completely. I always let my glossy accents dry at least overnight or 24 hours before I send out the card. And then that is my finished card for today. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Got some Mother's Day card inspiration. If you're not subscribed to my channel, go ahead, hit that subscribe button because I'll have many more videos coming up. And I will see you all back here next time. Bye, everyone.